What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rantin Review Entertainment. You know, we got to talk about it. It concluded the other week, X-Men 97, the latest offering from Marvel Studios from Disney. Kind of, sort of, not really part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We did talk about the first couple episodes when they dropped, but now that the series is over, the season is over, the first season, we got a lot to go over. But before we get into that, of course, you know it's YouTube. YouTube likes that algorithm thing with the like button and the subscription and the notification and all of that good stuff. So if you enjoy videos like this, please hit that like button. I do appreciate it very much. X-Men 97, let's talk about it. I was pleasantly shocked. I am a 90s kid. 90s teen, I should say. And the X-Men 97 was like the last Saturday morning cartoon I ever watched. It was like, that was the very, very tail end of me being, you know, almost too old to watch Saturday morning cartoons. But that one always made me very excited because I love the storyline. When I heard about X-Men 97, like a lot of people, I was a little bit skeptical because of what Disney Marvel's been putting out lately. But this thing knocked it out of the park. It knocked it out of the park way more times than it didn't. And I would even say it's not only a good update, a good reboot, or whatever you want to call these things. It's right up there with me. The other reboot I think that's been done very well over the last couple of years was Cobra Kai as an update for the Karate Kid series from the 80s. I think this X-Men 97 is, it just, because much like that show Cobra Kai, it just makes sense that this is what would happen with these characters. It didn't feel like to too much of an extent that they changed a lot of the characters to make it more appealing to the dreaded modern audience and all that stuff that doesn't exist anyway. But this show is for me. This show is for people like me, who do not mind animation, who do not think animation is somehow inferior because it's a Western thing. And all 9 episodes, I think it was 10 episodes, all 10 episodes are almost near perfect for the animated series itself. Like, I put it up with seasons 1, 2, and 3 of the original show, the original animated series. I think it's up there. It might be better or as good as any of those. Just to go through that, I guess I can do this by just going through the characters and the storylines. Primarily, first and foremost, let's start at the top with Charles Xavier. Charles Xavier ending the X-Men original animated series, being sick, having to go off with Lilandra out into space to heal himself. We don't see him for several of the first couple episodes. They sell the story that he died, which he didn't. And the X-Men are trying to continue on, and they've got they've got Charles leaving the legacy behind, and Scott, Cyclops, not really knowing what to do with it, but at the same time, Jean Grey is pregnant. I say that with tongue-in-cheek. Jean Grey is pregnant. They're about to have a kid, and Scott's wondering, you know, what's going on? You know, how can he lead the team? And the world gets opened up very quickly. They have problems with the Sentinels again. We have some of the regular villains from the original series, Bolivar Trask, etc., coming into the show. Master Mold is back, and they very quickly defeat this threat and put this threat down in the first episode. We're introduced to a lot of new characters in the show, but that leads us to what's kind of the main crux of the series, or the season, I should say, which is Magneto. Magneto comes in and shakes up everything. He takes over the X-Men. He's left in Charles's last will and testament to X-Men. This causes problems with almost everybody. Cyclops is upset because he's like, well, why did Xavier trust me? Jean wants to leave, and like, we need to go celebrate our own lives. Storm, she's got issues later on when she loses her powers. She goes through a whole thing. Magneto and Rogue and Gambit have the most out of left field love triangle that I did not expect to happen on this show, and it's one of the best things of the show, especially the unfortunate conclusion to it. And the first 5 episodes really set the pace for this whole show, and I was really excited about it. My favorite episode by far is episode 5. The Attack of Genosha It's very cool. It's very well done. It's very sad. It's just very visceral. You really feel it. You really get into it. And of course, spoiler alert for those of you who don't realize this is a spoiler video, Gambit's death, which, everybody was like, he'll come back by the end of the series. Spoiler, he doesn't. Well, kinda. We'll get to that later.
The name's Gambit, mon ami. Remember it.
And that the final moments of that episode where Rogue over Gambit's body and she's touching him finally with her hands and she's going, I can't feel you. It fades to black and you just hear her sobbing and saying, I can't feel you.
Sugar. I can't feel you.
That's just, that gave me goosebumps when I saw it. And that was the moment I said, this show's goated. This show is now goated. It is goated. So we did have some downsides though. One of the downsides, well, from outside of the show, is that the showrunner, who was fired before the show even came out, and who still seems to be talking a lot about the show, but we were kind of concerned about that, because when you hear that, okay, they fired the guy that was running the show before the show comes out, so is the show going to be any good? The show is actually excellent, which again is probably more of an indictment against Disney Marvel than anything else, that the one thing that you've done that's been absolutely excellent since Endgame, you fired the director for it before the show came out. So that says more about them than it does about this guy. The politics. Now, with X-Men, you're going to get politics because that's kind of the basis of the X-Men. So in this case, I don't mind it so much. And I do think, even though, yes, obviously there is a political ideology that it leans in towards because it is the X-Men, because it is dealing with the subjects it's dealing with, I do think that it balanced it out a little bit. And some people didn't see some of those things. And just not to go too political into it, but while yes, you do have the thing about discrimination and everything else, some people are saying that's woke. That is not woke. That is civil rights era stuff, man. The woke is not the same thing as civil rights, and a lot of the X-Men is civil rights era. Point being that there aren't any humans in this show who are pretending that they're mutants but really aren't, but everybody's accepting them as mutants even though they aren't. That's not what they're doing here. They're very, very realistic with what a group that is a minority would have to deal with in this world, and it's extrapolated from what minorities have to deal with in the real world. So I didn't have an issue with too much of that. There are some woke moments that go a little bit too preachy, but they're so few and far between, and that's what I don't mind, that it doesn't take away from the story, and they're not really the focus of everything. It's, again, the show's just not very preachy. But for a lot of other people who think it is too woke, there's another side of it, in particular, Episode 5. Episode 5 is an allegory, and from what I took it, from my understanding of your world events, especially what's going on right now in the world, that I saw Israel there. With you have Genosha, a established nation for a minority group that was oppressed, sanctioned by the United Nations, well, and the Allied powers in our time, back in the 40s with Israel. It's led by a guy who is a Holocaust survivor, and not only is he a Holocaust survivor, but Magneto is very much a Netanyahu kind of character, right? He has no compunction about blowing your ass up if you threaten his people. That is Magneto. Genosha is that, and we saw what was the fear of that. And pro-Israel stances are not very left-wing stances. They're kind of more center right-wing stances. So, and there was another instance later on in the show where I thought that, well, that's a very centrist idea. That's not very left-wing or right-wing or woke or red pill. So I think they did a good job of, even though they did deal with political issues, not being too preachy about one side is better than the other one. They represented different sides. They definitely have their slant and their view of them, but they did at least represent them fairly, well, outside of the Friends Against Humanity. But the Friends Against Humanity are basically just bigots, so there's not much to go into with them anyway. The big plot points in this series: Jean Grey, Madeline Pryor, and Cyclops. The whole story of Cyclops having a baby with Jean's clone, then being confused about which one he loved, then being confused about which one was real, finding out that Madeline was the clone, and Mr. Sinister was behind a lot of this stuff. They wrapped this up very quickly. Wolverine finally gets a kiss from Jean, the real Jean, so that was kind of cool, but he, being the man that he is, like, nope, not gonna do it, bub. That was awesome. I liked the side story with Wolverine and Morph's friendship and possible hinted relationship in the last episode. I'm not so sure about that. Morph, by the way, yes, they have changed. This is one of the woke things. Morph was always a he, but now they've changed Morph into a they. But that's, you don't go too far into that, fans or Disney Marvel, because the hypocrisy of it's just going to come out no matter what argument you're going to make on that thing. Morph is a shapeshifter. Shapeshifters are shapeshifters. They actually are, they're trans everything, so it doesn't really matter. But I like that friendship that they had, because that was kind of missing from the original series. It was always hinted at, but since Morph was just a kind of recurring character sporadically on the original series, we never got to see the friendship between Morph and Wolverine on the show. We do see it here. Wolverine, by the way, not the central part of the story. One of the first, I guess I would say, this isn't a movie, but I guess it's a feature for the X-Men that is not Wolverine centered. And because of that, Cyclops, who is a character, if you've just seen the movies, you don't like Cyclops, they did a good job with Cyclops. He is a very complex character, pulled in a bunch of different directions. He has that great scene where he's being interviewed and he's just like, he says what a lot of people are feeling, not what you would expect to come out of somebody who's a Boy Scout, but he was being real. You also see some strains in his relationship with Xavier during the latter half of the show. Xavier does come back. He has his own storyline with the Shi'ar and them being kind of an empire, an imperialist colonizing nation. So there's a lot of that subtext to the whole, well, it's not even really subtext, it's just text to the whole thing. I like that whole episode. Gambit, like I said, the scene with him and Rogue where she's talking about like why she's going to try to go with Magneto being king and queen of Genosha, and Gambit just kind of accepting it because Gambit's cool at AF. He's just like, yeah, Mon Ami, I'm cool with it. I thought that was great, and that way that always, it's just so good. I do love the subplot. I am one of the few people who actually like the Mojo video game episode, half an episode from episode 4. I think it was put in there at the right place and time. It was necessary because the next episode's about to get really heavy. So episode 4 being, this kind of half lighthearted episode with, Sunspot and Jubilee going into the Mojoverse video game. It's something that we saw in the original series too, and it's one of those things that felt like the original series. I've seen some people complain about it, but I'm like, the original series did that all the time. You would have these like little spin-offs, especially with Mojo. You'd have, the Mojo episodes where they would spin off and go into the Mojoverse. Like, I think they did like 3 or 4 times on the original show. So I had no problem with that. The second half of the season, it gets even deeper. It gets even crazier. We've got Bastion. We've got Mastimo. We've got different Sentinels. We've got changes in the team. The X-Men, at one point in time, they become kind of militant. They're like, we don't care if we kill people now. We're tired of this. Like, we keep fighting for this world, as much as what Scott said. There's a lot of, even Beast kind of pulls away from being Mr. Tolerance. He was especially if you remember the original series, episode 1, he stayed in jail the entire first season because he wanted to let the thing play out, because he believed in justice. Not so much anymore after Genosha. So all of this winds up with them just throwing a whole lot of deep cut storylines, a lot of cameos. You see Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, and even Captain America's in an episode, Iron Man's in an episode. We got Silver Samurai, I think, is an episode. Omega Red appears here. Morphs into lots of different characters as Easter eggs. There are a lot of subtle hints by things in the background on the shows, that to things in a comic book and to probably where they're going with this story. We had a lot of hints of Apocalypse. They're saving him for a later season. Overall, not to get, because to get into all of this stuff, they like I said, they run through so much of it so fast. A little too fast at times is one criticism, is that I feel they're burning through a lot of storylines really quickly. But I think ultimately there's so many storylines. I mean, you've got decades and decades of lore to pull from, so them running through about 20 different storylines in one season is not killing me too much. I would say hopefully for season 2 they kind of slow it down just a tad. But overall, outside of a few little problems here and there with some storyline issues, some character changes, and some, you know, questionable choices here and there, which are very, very small, X-Men 97 is a home run. Absolutely. It's a damn near a grand slam as far as a Disney Marvel Studios property. And I definitely suggest you see it. Coming out of it, the cliffhangers, obviously we've got the X-Men being split up through time. Jean and Cyclops are with a young Cable way in the future, while Xavier, Beast, I believe Rogue, Magneto, and everybody else, and a lot of the, well, not everybody else, some of the other characters, they're in a different time frame in the past, and they meet past Apocalypse. We've got the current timeline people, Jubilee and Sunspot, and some of the other ones who are in the current timeline. Obviously, they pulled in Magneto, ripping all of the adamantium out of Wolverine. He's in a coma. Again, that's what I mentioned it before about Morph kind of standing over him, talking about how he loved Logan through morphing to Jean. So is that going to be a thing? Who knows in the future? And the biggest cliffhanger for a lot of people who were waiting for Apocalypse, at the very end, back on Genosha, in the pit where Gambit died. Yeah, the premonition's probably going to come true. The same premonition Xavier had when he was with the Shi'ar. It does look like Apocalypse is going to resurrect Gambit and make him one of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Most likely death, given the kind of hint that was dropped at the end of the very last episode. So overall, if you have not seen X-Men 97, I strongly suggest you watching it, especially if you're an X-Men fan, if you like the X-Men movies, if you like the original one. Doesn't matter. If you just like a good goddamn story, X-Men 97, start to finish, is really, really good. So I'm definitely recommending it. Again, the best episodes, I would say episodes 1, 2, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are the best, which is basically half the season, are the best episodes. So, but I want to know what you guys thought about X-Men 97. Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. Until next time, I will see you guys here as I find other things in the entertainment world to review here on the Rantin Review Entertainment. Don't forget, over on the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling, we've got some interesting topics coming up soon about the IWC and why the IWC sucks in 2024, tribalism and AEW versus WWE and all that stuff. Over on the Rantin Review Gaming channel, we are currently doing a Let's Play of Hellblade 1 and 2, Senua's Sacrifice and Senua's Saga. There's a lot of S's there. But until then, check those out if you're interested, and I'll see you guys here for more news, rumors, and reviews on the Rantin Review Entertainment. Have a good day.